Hardware costs have skyrocketed over the last few years, making the entry price for modern gaming feel like a massive luxury tax. If you're running a standard laptop with an older i3 processor, 4 GB of RAM, and no dedicated graphics card, your options look bleak. The standard advice for this kind of setup is usually to stick to 2D indie titles, or to play whatever puzzle game runs smoothly in a browser tab. That advice assumes that without a high-end GPU, you are permanently locked out of massive Hollywood-scale narrative experiences. The fix is not trying to force a 2024 release to run at 10 frames per second on the lowest possible settings. The actual solution is looking at a very specific window of game development, the 2010 to 2014 optimization era. This chart plots hardware cost against narrative quality. Modern blockbusters sit in the top right, demanding thousands of dollars in silicon. Basic browser titles sit down in the bottom left, lacking character depth. We are targeting the top left quadrant, where high-tier narrative meets rock-bottom requirements. An integrated graphics chip only limits your ability to render real-time lighting and shadows. It does not limit your ability to process brilliant writing. Older big-budget games offer the highest return on investment for budget hardware. This decision tree will help us filter 7 specific games from this era based on your available playtime and gameplay preferences, starting with 2 main paths, linear cinematic and open world. Let's follow the linear cinematic branch first. This path requires you to engage with highly scripted, corridor-based level design. You are moving from point A to point B without wandering off. Rockstar's Max Payne 3 is the premier choice here for a dark, character-driven psychological study. You play as a severely depressed protagonist dealing directly with the tragic fallout of the previous 2 games. Mechanically, it relies on an iconic slow-motion shooting system that remains incredibly precise and responsive on older processors. If you prioritize tension over pure action, Alan Wake takes that same linear structure and applies it to a survival horror framework. It plays out like an episodic television show that relies heavily on narrative plot twists, firmly cementing it as a psychological thriller rather than a standard monster shooting gallery. For high-budget, explosive Hollywood spectacle, there is Call of Duty Black Ops 2. It subverts standard military shooter tropes by delivering a highly complex narrative featuring branching choices and a massive twist in the final act. The primary trade-off for this entire path is that there is 0 open-world exploration. Once you finish the 10 to 15-hour campaigns, the replay value drops significantly. However, that strict linearity delivers an incredibly dense narrative pace. If you only have an hour or 2 to play each week, these provide the absolute highest yield for your time. If you have more time available, the evaluation shifts to the open-world action path. The gameplay loop here expands dramatically. You are clearing map markers, solving environmental puzzles, and using vehicles to traverse large environments. Tomb Raider 2013 is a masterclass in the origin story reboot format. It takes an established character and forces them into a gritty, ground-level survival scenario. It constantly balances intense action sequences with highly fluid parkour traversal. Far Cry 3 scales things up even further by dropping you into a vibrant, massive tropical island setting. It anchors that massive map with an incredibly complex, deeply psychological main villain who drives the tension of the entire story. From an economic standpoint, this path gives you a massive hours per dollar ratio. The sheer scale of the map and the volume of side quests will keep you busy for weeks. But that scale introduces a major hardware constraint, the draw distance tax. Rendering a vast open horizon with moving foliage and dynamic weather inherently pushes an older i3 CPU much harder than rendering a static, enclosed hallway. You will have to accept mandatory visual compromises. Specifically, you will need to aggressively lower anti-aliasing, a graphic setting that smooths jagged edges on 3D models, just to maintain your frame rate. Open-world games demand the heaviest visual sacrifices on an i3 processor, but they reward you with unmatched mechanical freedom and immense replayability. The final branch on our map introduces the highest level of mechanical complexity. Dishonored puts you in control of an assassin with supernatural abilities, relying heavily on stealth mechanics and vertical traversal to clear levels. It gives you incredible player agency. You get a toolkit of overlapping abilities, meaning you can solve a single assassination target in dozens of different ways. Middle-earth's Shadow of Mordor offers that same level of freedom, but applies it to an incredibly fluid, responsive historical combat design. This flowchart shows the game's defining technical achievement, the Nemesis system. When an enemy defeats you, the game promotes them. When you return, they actively remember your past failure, altering the narrative based entirely on your past mistakes. The harsh trade-off here is the steep learning curve. Systems-driven games heavily punish players who try to run in and mindlessly shoot everything in sight. Before you boot up any of these games, we have to do a quick hardware reality check. To run any of these smoothly on 4 GB of RAM, you have to make absolute non-negotiable adjustments in your settings menu. Shadows must be locked to low, VSync must be turned off, and your resolution dropped to 720p. If you want pure action, choose Black Ops 2 or Max Payne 3. If you want absolute freedom, pick Far Cry 3 or Shadow of Mordor. And if you are looking for tension and stealth, go with Alan Wake or Dishonored. An outdated PC only stops you from seeing modern graphical textures. It cannot stop you from experiencing a masterpiece